a little about that tonight. How many of you are familiar with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? Okay, so raise your hand high if you're familiar, so I can see who's perhaps not familiar. Okay, so most people are generally familiar. Of course, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said, I don't know Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as far as I'm considered. Or no, Sanatana Goswami said, I can never understand the glories of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he's unlimited. But still, we'll attempt to speak a little. So, yeah. How many of you are familiar with Krishna? My Carlos is so humble, he's not raising his hand. So, yeah. So, okay. We'll speak a little. I have some notes on my phone. It's kind of a crazy day. So, Om Jnana Tamarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurve Namaha. I was born in the darkest ignorance. My spiritual master is opening my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. So, when speaking about these types of topics, it's really quite incredible what knowledge is available in terms of spirituality, because so much of the time, and having lived in Sedona and been to different places and studied a lot of different spiritual practices, so much of the time, spiritual life is watered down to this kind of sentimental, feel-good thing, which is, it is feel-good, of course. You feel really nice if you're spiritually advanced. It's quite wonderful. But so much of the time, people are in ignorance as to what is actual spirituality and what they're actually capable of, what they're actually capable of experiencing. It's so amazing what the human form of life is capable of experiencing. No other life form actually in the whole world, except the human form of life, is capable of experiencing the levels of high consciousness, the levels of bliss that this form of life offers one. And that's why the human form of life is distinguished from the animal forms of life. Because in the animal forms of life, one is not able to question what is God, what is the absolute truth, what is the soul, what is matter and what is spirit, what is living and what is dead. The animal forms of life are simply concerned with eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Whereas the human form of life can transcend this materialistic principle and live in a higher dimension of consciousness. So it's like a waste if we have this human body and we don't strive to this extraordinarily high level of being. It's like having your giant mansion and then you have your, $3 million Maserati and you just drive it down to the mailbox and back. It's really, really sad because, you have a $3 million Maserati, you should, go fast in it. So the human form of life is like a $3 million Maserati in terms of life forms. It's the most wonderful life form in terms of our ability to understand higher levels of being. So it's described in the Vedanta Sutra, which is like the conclusive knowledge of the Vedas. It says that the human form of life is the time to inquire. Ato Brahma Jigyasa, that now I've achieved the human form of life, let us inquire about Brahman. Brahma Jigyasa, let us ask, what is the absolute truth? So all the other forms of life are going on, and then the human form of life, Brahma Jigyasa, what is the absolute truth? What is the truth of what's really going on here? And this human form of life is capable of that. So if we're not asking that question, we've not really actually become humans yet. So good news, since you're all here, you're all humans. Yeah, congratulations. You made it to the human form of life. So, but seriously, it's a waste. So, amongst the studies of spirituality, one word that is commonly dropped among higher echelons of scholars and religious scholars, spiritual scholars, is this word theology. And theology, by dictionary definition, means the study of God and the relationship of the world to God. And in terms of theology, what is presented by the avatar of God, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is depicted here on this wall, and this painting is done by our dearly beloved Bala Gopinath. a really powerful artist who's getting embarrassed. And also this Prabhupada also was Srila Bala Gopinath. So, yeah. So, what is the relationship of the living entity with the supreme transcendence? And what is the relationship of that supreme transcendence to the world? And what does knowing that relationship actually give one? It's so powerful. And that is the most elaborately explained by this incarnation, Sri Krishna Chaitanya. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Yada yada hi dharmasya, glanir bhavati bharata, abhyutamam adharmasya, tadam nirjam shujam yaham. That whenever and wherever there's a decline in religious principles, at that time I appear. He says, Paritranaya sadhunam, to deliver the sadhus or the saintly people, vinashraya chaduskritam, to annihilate the miscreants or the demoniac, and dharma samstapanartaya, that he's reestablishing the principles of religion or the principles of dharma, what is real spirituality. So from this we can understand that God himself enters into this world either as himself or as a form of his representative, like the Son of God, or we hear different things, prophets of so many types. The Lord is entering into the world to give us this eternal spiritual principle. And that eternal spiritual principle, when broken down to its simplest form, if you can describe it in one word, it is love. And everybody is seeking love. Everybody wants love. Everybody is really after this love. This is the juice of life, is to have love in our heart. But so many people are unaware of what love really is. This is the issue. And therefore, because of the mind, which is contaminated by this material atmosphere we live in, and is contaminated by so many types of conditioning, that we're contaminated by fear, or the TV, we're bombarded by so many different images, and therefore the mind becomes contaminated. And the mind is translating the soul's innate desire for love into so many different things. I desire this, I desire that, I desire this, I desire that. Kama kami, continuously trying to fulfill these desires. But actually, the real desire for the living entity is love. And it is stated in the Bhagavatam that the paradharma, the supreme dharma or the supreme religion, the supreme spiritual path for all living entities is yato bhaktir adhoksaje. Savai pum sam yato bhaktir adhoksaje. That supreme spiritual path is that by which someone can have a loving relationship with that supreme transcendence. How do we actually relate with that supreme transcendence? How do we actually have a consciousness of it and become aware of it, and in that way become elevated in our being to the highest potentiality? It's described that there's 3 levels of understanding this absolute truth. One is called Sambandha Gyan, which means knowledge of the relationship of the Lord and the living entity. Then Abhideya, how do we act in that relationship? And then Prayojana, what is the result of that relationship? So before anything, we have to have this Sambandha Gyan. What is our relationship? And just like Krishna says, and Krishna speaks the Bhagavad Gita as the most authoritative word of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in 700 concise verses describing the science of connecting to the Supreme, not the religion. This is not religion, this is scientific. Because Krishna is speaking scientifically. It's not a matter of names and dresses, and I'm a Christian, I'm a Hindu, I'm a Jew. These are scientific principles. Whether one is a Christian, whether one is a Hindu, one is a Muslim, A plus B equals C, 1 plus 2 equals 3. I'm not trying to rhyme. So whatever one may be, these are universal principles. And so if one performs this process as laid down by the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the Bhagavad Gita, one will achieve that state of being, without a doubt. There's absolutely no doubt. It's science. So Krishna appeared and he says that I come whenever and wherever there's a decline in spiritual practice or religious principles. And this incarnation, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Hare Bol Lavanga, Hare Krishna. This incarnation of Lord Chaitanya appears after Krishna. About 5,000 years after Krishna appears, Krishna again appears as Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, or the Absolute, the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the form of his devotee. So some of you said you're not familiar, and some of you said you're not familiar with Krishna, so not to be too heavy or lay too much knowledge on. But in other words, we can just say it concisely. God himself appears in this world time and time again to teach this message of love. And the most recent appearance of that supreme absolute truth is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who's very, very special in his presentation of this wonderful advanced theology. Because, some people can say, like Prabhupada says in one purport in the Bhagavad Gita, he says, people say God is great, but they do not know how great God is. It's nice. People say, oh, God is great, but they don't know anything about. And so only in this Krishna consciousness, only in this Bhagavatam knowledge is one actually able to access so many details about the supreme absolute truth. And in that way, become very, very happy, very blissful. Susukam kartamaviyam, very blissful. Because there's so many details. People ask, like one common question we get a lot is, oh, you say Krishna, you say he. Is God only male or is God female? God is both. Supreme Absolute Truth is both male and female, has both feminine and masculine qualities. So it's Radha Krishna. Radha is the feminine aspect of the Lord, or the female energy of the Lord, the feminine energy of the Lord, and Krishna is the masculine energy of the Lord. And Lord Chaitanya is considered the combined incarnation of the feminine and masculine energies of the Lord. Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Radha Krishna Nahayanya, the supreme combination of both the feminine and masculine energy of the Lord. And he's appeared to give us this most sublime process for self-realization that's ever been spoken by any form, any incarnation, any prophet. So one thing I don't usually talk about in my classes is like life after death, because although it's a huge part of our theology and our philosophy and a big question people have, I find that a lot of people, they find it hard to connect to. I always did when I grew up in church. It was like, you're going to go to heaven, but it was like, what about right now? Like, God can give me a hand right now. I'm kind of suffering, and it was like the problems I was experiencing in my day-to-day life were so, at that time in that present state of being, were so massive and overwhelming to me. I didn't really have time to think about life after death. I was just trying to kind of make it through the day. So yeah, maybe we go to heaven, maybe we don't, maybe we go to hell. I'm not really so concerned with that. So most of my classes are dealing with, how is this Krishna consciousness going to help you in this right now, right here, right now? If you just started chanting Hare Krishna tomorrow, what would happen the day after tomorrow? And the answer is your consciousness would become purified. You'd become very blissful and very happy, free of so many illusions, and you'd begin to be able to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead at every step. That's a fact. If you follow the science properly, that's the key. But tonight I was going to talk a little bit about life after death, because it is relevant to us right now. And how many of you have thought about that? Spent some time thinking about what happens perhaps after we die? So yeah, when I was a kid, I remember very clearly learning about death. I was with my mom, and somehow it came up, and she was like, yeah, we die. And I was like, wait, what? I remember I was really concerned. I asked her, I said, Mom, are you going to die? And she said, yeah. And I was really destroyed, oh no, I remember very clearly. It was traumatic for me. It was a clear memory. And I remember she told me it was a wise mother moment. She said, some people are in, she felt bad because I was really concerned that she was going to die. And she said, that's unlikely, at least right now, because I'm I'm in my 30s, and, it's she said that people have the morning of their life, the noon of their life, the afternoon of their life, and the evening of their life. And after the evening of their life, they're finished. And I remember she told me she's like still in the mourning phase, kind of. So, and like I really think back to that moment now because my mom's getting older now, and I think that was over 20 years ago probably. So, I was young when I asked that question, maybe 3 or 4 years old, and so now she's older, and I think how much I love my mom. So it's a serious thing to question, and people question it. Some people think, oh, it's just, I heard different things. People say it's just after you die, it's just black and that's it, it's finished. And okay, well, there's no evidence of that actually. You can't remember a time when you didn't exist. You only remember existence. Your memory is faded at a certain point. You don't remember when you're a child mostly. So our memory doesn't go back so far in this human form of life. And the body's always changing. This is the basic philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter. The body's always changing. And so we say you take a new body after death. That's what we say. And we understand that as a fact. Because even in this life, you take a new body. You had a child's body, and now you have an adult body. You have a different body than you had when you were a child. But you're still the same. You have a different mind than you had when you were a child. But still you're the same. The same awareness is there. The same consciousness is there. That has never changed, and nor will that ever change. That energy of consciousness is eternal. And therefore, at the time of death, one has to take a new body. Dehinosmin yata dehe komaram yovaram jara tata dehantara praptir dirastatra namuyati. And the living entities in this material world, they're continuously passing from boyhood to youth, from youth to old age to boyhood, whatever, however it goes. And then at the time of death, they're taking a new body. And a sober person, he's not bewildered by that. So we're not bewildered by that death. That's the first thing to understand. Prabhupada actually said that. Prabhupada's our great spiritual. Where's Prabhupada? Prabhupada's our great spiritual teacher. Yeah. Who came and brought this Krishna consciousness. But one of the last things he said when he was traveling, the last place he traveled before he went back to India and died, left his body, was he said he was very sick and he came to London and he was very, very sick and he didn't speak very much, but he said the first thing you have to understand is that you are eternal. The first thing we have to understand is that we're eternal living beings. There's never been a time when we don't exist, nor will there ever be a time when we won't exist. We'll always continue to be. So this is the fundamental understanding. And if anything you want to understand in Eastern spirituality, if you actually want to understand God at all or understand any type of higher consciousness, you have to first off at least get that through your head theoretically, that I'm an eternal being. And according to the Bhagavad Gita, we take a new body after death. And there's a lot of even material evidence of that. Children remembering their past lives. Hundreds and hundreds. Actually, there's thousands of cases of children accurately remembering past lives. And they can go back to those places that the children remember and find that grave and find those people. And the children knows the names of their kids and all these things. So tons of evidence in support of that. So with all that being said, what about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? What about him? So death is very unnatural for the living being because we've already established that we're eternal. That even though the body, we're continuously dying. Actually, we're changing. All the cells are dying every 7 years, and we're having new bodies. So this dead matter is always dying. The body's always dying. But the soul, the consciousness remains as it is. So death is very unnatural for the soul. Wouldn't you agree? That it just seems like when I was a little child, I was thinking, this doesn't seem right. And we hear that throughout spiritual practices. Even the Buddha, he went out and saw birth, death, old age, and disease, and he was like, wait a minute, I'm very disturbed by this. So it's common that this is not natural for the living entity. So we're in an unnatural position. We're eternal living beings in a temporary body. That's very precarious for an eternal living being that's infinitely full of the potentiality to love God and other living beings. It is extremely unnatural. And so, so the living entities are doing things in very crazy ways. If you think about it, if you were told that you weren't going to die, you're living eternally, how would that change your decisions you make now? Wouldn't you do things a lot differently? Like we really, maybe you wouldn't spend so much time and energy trying to make money. Maybe you wouldn't spend so much time and energy trying to get something done that doesn't really mean very much. Maybe you wouldn't spend so much time and energy trying to make ourselves look like we're something we're not. So much of our energy is going to that. And really, we're wasting our energy on that, most living entities. And so the devotee, he begins to focus his energies on this sense of being eternal and in his eternal occupation. Krishna says, Mamaivam sho jiva loke, jiva bhuta sanatana. He says that the living entities in this material world are my eternal fragmental parts. So what are you? You're a fragment of Krishna. You're a fragment of God. And you're eternal. But we're suffering the six senses and the mind. We're struggling with these six senses and mind. So death is unnatural. But if we can understand we're eternal, if we can understand we're eternal, it changes everything. And further than that, where is it we are going in our next destination? After this body, what type of body do we take? How many of you have heard of karma? How many of you believe in karma? So karma, I like to tell this when I'm distributing books at the campus. Sometimes I ask that one a lot, actually, because people like it. Everybody's heard of karma, and most people always say they believe in karma. Because even though like some, they may have grown up in some different religions, still they have this sense of karma. And I say, do you believe in karma? And they say, oh, yeah, I think I do believe in karma. I say, what goes around comes around, right? Yeah. And sometimes they say, I don't believe in karma. And I say, well, Isaac Newton believed in karma. He says, for every action, there's an opposite or equal reaction. So it's a universal principle. For every action, there's an opposite or equal reaction. Or sometimes they say, I'm a Christian. So, well, Jesus said, as you sow, so shall you reap. So it's there. It's there in the Bible. It's there in science. It's there in the Vedas. You can't avoid it. Karma is real. So we take our next body based on karma. Prabhupada likes to say, if you live like dog, you take body of dog. You live like hog, you take body of hog. If you live like demigod, you take body of demigod. But if you live like a pure, eternal part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, if you live like a spirit, if you live in your spiritual nature, you take a spiritual body and you don't reincarnate in this material world. You enter into the eternal reality. You exit the matrix. That word matrix, you can break it down. Matrix, matter, magus. There's so many different, come from that word matricy. What's a matricy? It's a set. So we're in this matrix. It's called samsara in Sanskrit. Taking birth, taking death, old age, disease, birth, death, old age, and disease. And to exit that cycle of being entrapped in matter, that is liberation. And one can do that by living in their spiritual nature, living as who they are, becoming who they are. So Lord Chaitanya, he came very, very special. It says famously, there's famous, beautiful prayer. Lord Chaitanya, he was so beautiful. I mean, he's Krishna himself. He's the all-attractive personality of Godhead. He's so wonderfully beautiful, very tall, with golden effulgence. And he would wander the streets of Nadia, of India, Mayapur, and he would chant Krishna's holy name. Haribol Sham Gopal. I realized I didn't give you a welcome. A welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. He was wandering the streets of Nadia, chanting like we were doing earlier. That was what he did. He would chant. And he came across, actually this was in Prayag, he came across one Sanatan Goswami, who became his very intimate follower. And when Sanatan Goswami saw this beautiful, tall, glorious form of Krishna, he was overwhelmed with ecstatic love, because everybody who saw Lord Chaitanya became spiritually enlightened, because he was that powerful, that effulgent. Actually, even in accounts of the Portuguese who were in Goda, they write about this. giant golden being who had hundreds of followers chanting. He's a real, it's a real historical person, Lord Chaitanya. This is all historical. People can't say it's a myth because there's literally so many accounts of Lord Chaitanya. It's a historical person. You can go to the sites of his associates, the samadhis, like their tombs. You can go to those places. So when he saw Lord Chaitanya, he said, Namo Mahavandanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaur Tuvishe Namaha. He ecstatically spoke that prayer, and he said, I offer my respectful obeisances unto Lord Sri Krishna Chaitanya, who is the most magnanimous, who's the most merciful form of the Lord that ever existed, because he's bestowing what no other form of the Lord ever gave, pure love of Krishna. Actually says he's more magnanimous than Krishna himself, because he's bestowing what no one else ever gave. He's bestowing pure love of Krishna. Not even Krishna bestowed pure love of Krishna. Krishna said, Sarvadharman Prityaja Mamekam Sharanam Vraja Ham Tvam Sarvapapebhyo Moksha Shamima Sucha. He said, surrender unto me and I'll relieve you of all your karma. Don't fear. That's what Krishna said. Lord Chaitanya said, just chant Hare Krishna and I will give you pure love for me. I'll give you the highest thing. So, yeah. So Lord Chaitanya, they said that there's no one more magnanimous than this wonderful, beautiful Lord Chaitanya. So how does that relate to after death? Because I was just in Hawaii, and I was spending some time with my dear Shiksha gurus, very dear. In fact, if I had to pick one person in this world who's a real Shiksha guru for me, it's my dear friend of mine. And we were there, and I was thinking, I asked, how do we stay positive in spiritual life? How do we maintain this positive attitude? And he explained, he says, actually, what do you have to be negative about? If you actually understand what's really going on, like I said, the first thing you have to understand is that you're eternal. If you can understand that, it changes everything. Because we've been suffering for so long. If we think about life in the material world, it's full of miseries. This body, people are trying to squeeze as much enjoyment from the body as they can. And the example a lot of times common given, you take your hand. How many ways can you enjoy with your hand? The first thing that comes to mind is you can pet a kitty. That's nice, You're petting a kitty, it's nice. The kitty's nice and soft, and you feel like, how many ways can you hurt your hand? You can burn it, you can smash it, you can cut it, you can pinch it, you can have your nails pulled out. You have so many things.
Put a toothpick in it and then kick a wall.
So many things you can do to hurt your hand. Yep. So many things that can happen. You can do so many things. And this body's like that. How many ways can we enjoy our body? Oh, like we can take intoxicants, we can eat really good food, we can have sex. These are the things people are thinking are enjoyment. But how much of your food, how much can you eat? Someone gives you, everybody loves pizza generally. So when I was in Hawaii, they had some really good pizza at that temple they were making. So you make I make a very nice pizza. And you can eat, I think last time we had pizza, I ate about 5 slices. I was really into it, But that's a lot, right? It's a lot of pizza, but still, it took me only like 20 minutes.
I was there for that.
Yeah. No, that wasn't the last time, actually. I had a pizza in Hawaii also.
Oh, I see.
So anyhow, so I got 20 minutes of enjoyment, and then afterward I actually suffered pretty bad. So, how much enjoyment is there? People, they take intoxication. Okay, they feel good for some time, and then they feel bad. Also, it drains their bank account, drains their bank balance, causes so many different consequences. Sex life. Everybody loves sex life, right? But still, that's only lasts for some time. No one thinks you're pretty after you're 55. It's kind of like things start going downhill from in that world also. So, everything has its cessation point. Everything in the material world, all the enjoyment has this, it ceases at a certain point. And okay, say you live the healthiest life, you go to the gym every day, you drink clean spring water, you're vegan, you eat organic food, you do yoga, you live in Hawaii, you get clean air, you take baths in clean water every day, you're not exposed to any Wi-Fi radiation, all of that. What do you get? What's your reward for all of that?
Death.
Yeah,
Old
right.
age.
Old age.
Old age.
And then death. Old age followed by death. That's your reward. So, okay. So all of that, and still the reward is just death. You just die a little bit later than you would die earlier, either way. So what we're presenting is that there's a higher type of enjoyment. There's a higher type of love. There's a higher type of existence that's fully available to us. And Lord Chaitanya, he's bestowing that. That's what he appeared in this world to do, to bestow this beautiful experience. Let me see here. To give that. And so when I asked Narahari, I said, how do you stay positive? And he says, like when you come to this process, first off, you really become joyful. Because as a living entity, we already described what is a living entity. Mamaivam sho jiva loke. You're part and parcel of the Supreme Being. So if you were the Supreme Being, how would you be? If you had unlimited, what would you do with it? How would you choose? Angry and jealous. No. You'd feel blissful. You'd feel blissful. So the Supreme Lord is described in the Brahma Samhita as Ishvara Parama Krishna Sat Chit Ananda Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda Sarvakarna Karanam. Described that Supreme Being, Krishna, the Ishvara Parama, the supreme controller of everything and anything, Sat Chit Ananda Vigraha. His form is completely made of eternality, knowledge, and ananda, bliss. He's made of pure bliss. His name is Govinda, and he's Sarvakarna Karanam. He's the original cause of all causes. And that same Krishna has appeared in the form of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to bestow this bliss on every living entity. So as part and parcel of that Supreme Being, because you are part of that being, you are of the same qualities in your natural position. So people are always thinking, I want to be very beautiful. They're dressing up very nicely and doing so many things. They're getting the nice clothes, they're putting on makeup and, so many things, Devotees are trying to find the perfect tilak and make it very nice, So doing so many things we're trying to do. We want to look nice. But why? Actually, we're not this body. And of course, we want to look nice as devotees because we're representing Krishna. And we might need to look nice for our jobs and whatever. But on a deeper level, it's not the main focus of life because we're already beautiful. So if you have any insecurity about not being beautiful, or you think you're not good enough, or I don't make enough money, or I have a mundane job, whatever it may be, a spiritual level, you're part and parcel of Krishna. That means you are the most beautiful. When Krishna looks at his part and parcels, he thinks these are the most beautiful. So you're already full of beauty, but you just haven't realized that. And full of love. In fact, you're empowered to give pleasure to the supreme source of all pleasure. I mean, if you think about that, we're empowered to give pleasure to God. That's our existence. We can really make God smile. That's a fact. And if you do, then you become very blissful. So what to speak of other living entities? When you become a devotee, one time they asked Prabhupada, they said, Prabhupada, actually Prabhupada's our spiritual teacher. Everybody loves you. Everybody loves you, Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, that's because I love everybody. How do you love everybody? You have to see them as they are. You can't see them as a body. You have to see them as a soul. Because you can't love a body. It doesn't work because there's always something that's going to frustrate you about someone. Always something that's going to get to you. It's just how we are because we're individuals. We're all unique. Everybody, every living being, every blade of grass is a unique soul. And therefore, if you're trying to love people based on the body, it's all going to really fall apart. That's why 50% of marriages fail. And what to speak of relationships. We'll get there. We'll get there. So when you see someone as part and parcel of Krishna and you love Krishna, therefore you can love everybody. Prabhupada loved everybody. And the devotee, he actually feels love for everybody. And he can really make other people feel good about themselves. He can really make them feel uplifted. That's part of being a devotee. So Nari said, yeah, you're doing this process. You're chanting Hare Krishna. You're living in this world. You're chanting. Radha will help you. Help with the prasadam. You're, I just volunteered you, Radha, but anyways, I counted on you. I was counting on you. But Darnell's the sweetest, so he has to eat. He eats sweet. It's a symptom of Brahman. So, yeah, why should we be positive? Because if you take up this process of Krishna consciousness, the biography of Lord Chaitanya is called the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, which means Chaitanya can mean consciousness. In Rita means immortality. So actually, when you translate that word Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, it means the activities of the Supreme Being or of consciousness in its eternality. So when we're consciousness, but we're in temporality. We're thinking, I'm Chris Casillas, I'm so-and-so, I'm Kirtanesvara Gauranga Das, I'm Govinda Madhava Das, I'm Darnell, I'm so-and-so, we think like that. And we have this temporal identity that dies at the end of 100 years max. But when we think, I'm the eternal part and parcel of Krishna, what is my activity? And so Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Lord Chaitanya is demonstrating, he's God himself in the form of a devotee, demonstrating how a living entity who's enlightened, fully the highest level of enlightenment, fully aware in his eternal position, acts. Consciousness in eternality. And what is that action? That action is to be of constant service and love to the Supreme Being and to other living beings on the spiritual platform. So when you take up these teachings of Lord Chaitanya, which culminate in chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. When you take up this chanting, you try to give it to others, you take Krishna Prasad, you dance in Kirtan, you hear this philosophy, you come and do what we're doing right now. If you can absorb yourself in that, you're living on the eternal platform because you're not living as a body anymore. That's what the consciousness is meant to do. The soul is meant to have a loving relationship with Krishna. Krishna loves the soul loves Krishna. And so simply by chanting, by hearing, by taking prasadam, this process of bhakti, one is situated on that spiritual platform and they transcend the body. And therefore, it's very, very easy to control the senses, to become self-controlled, to become humble. So many wonderful qualities develop in a devotee. And so at the end of that all, because you lived your life like a consciousness, you didn't get any karma. You're living like karma is for the material or for matter. That's a material law of nature. For every action, there's an opposite or equal reaction. But when you are no longer connected, you're still in the body, but you're not connected into it. You're in this world, but not of this world. When you're situated in that position by this process of practicing Krishna consciousness, by keeping Krishna first and chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. By living in that way, you are on the spiritual platform, and therefore, at the end of this life, you don't enter another body. You go to the spiritual dimension in association with Krishna eternally. You don't, we'll get there. You go in association with Krishna eternally, right? You have this eternal relationship. And there in that spiritual world, there's no birth, no death, no old age, no disease. There's no more reincarnation. One is in eternal bliss, an ever-increasing eternal bliss. So Lord Chaitanya, he gave this simple process. And by following that process, everybody and anybody can live like that. And if you just think about it, I'm chanting Hare Krishna, I'm doing this bhakti yoga, what is there to be negative about? Yeah, it's only a short 100 years max, a short 100 years max. And then what? I don't take birth again. I enter the spiritual world. Someone may say, how do you know? Well, the answer is that Krishna even says, you can experience in this life that sense of eternality so powerfully that it's actually said, pratyak savagyamam dharmam susukam kartamavyayam, that this process is the perfection of all religion. Pratyak savagyamam dharmam, because it's not a matter of I believe in Jesus, I believe in Muhammad, I believe in Buddha, I believe in this, I believe in that. No, it's not a matter of belief. It's a matter of experience. It's pratyak. It becomes completely evident to you. One can see God clear as day, and one can see himself. And therefore, susukam kartamavyayam, one experiences sukam, happiness. Susukam, one experiences extraordinary happiness. Kartamavyayam, that never ends and always increases. So if one is living like that, it becomes very evident. At the end of this life, I'm finished. I'm finished with this. So yeah, there's some suffering. I have this body, I have some karma left. You know, the example given, you turn off the fan, it still spins for a while before it stops completely. So yeah, I'm living, I have some, there's some difficulties, but I really have no reason to be negative or worry about it, because at the end, I'm returning to the spiritual dimension. And I'm experiencing that in my heart right now. I'm feeling it. Just like the sun is rising, I'm not seeing the sun above the sun. I'm not seeing the sun. It's not over the horizon yet, but it's very, very clear the sun is rising. The light is there. The darkness is dissipated. The stars are disappearing. Everything is happening. I just haven't seen that sun over the horizon yet. So for the bhakti yogi, the understanding that they're going to return to the spiritual world, if they're practicing this properly, becomes clear as day. I can see it coming. I see it right there. I'm already really there. I'm just a few meters away, few years away. Less probably most of us in here, if we take this process, we're less than 60 years from returning to the spiritual world. It's really, really wonderful. So we have nothing to be negative about in the whole world. Everything is positive. And Prabodhananda Saraswati, one of our great teachers and acharyas, he said, the material world, yeah, it's full of misery, sukha dukhalayam ashashvatam, but he said, for the devotee, he sees nothing but happiness everywhere he looks. He sees nothing but happiness everywhere he looks, because all there is happiness for it. All there is positivity. So I'm going to read two more things, and then we'll continue. We'll do some questions. I just wanted to read this. A few verses from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, just descriptions of Lord Chaitanya, and a few in the Chaitanya Bhagavat. Here we go. This is verse 4 of the first chapter, first Adi Lila, first volume of Chaitanya Charitamrita, verse 4, first chapter. May the Supreme Lord, who is known as the son of Srimati Sachi Devi, be transcendently situated in the innermost chambers of your heart, resplendent with the radiance of molten gold. He has appeared in this age of Kali by his causeless mercy to bestow what no incarnation has ever offered before, the most sublime and radiant mellow of devotional service. Do you guys want some prasadam?
Sure.
Yeah. Are you leaving right now?
5 minutes.
Okay. The prasadam should be here in just a second. If you go back to the kitchen there, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
You can just go in there and you'll see Ethan and Leela and Radha. Just tell them we're headed out and ask for, tell them I told you to get a plate.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. The mellow of conjugal love. The loving affairs of Radha and Krishna are transcendental manifestations of the Lord's internal pleasure potency. Although Radha and Krishna are one in their identity, previously they separated themselves. Now these two transcendental identities have again united in the form of Sri Krishna Chaitanya. I bow down to him who manifested himself with the sentiment and complexion of Srimati Radharani, although he is Krishna himself. So it's beautiful prayers. And then this nice Chaitanya Bhagavat, which is a lot of devotees in ISKCON haven't read the Chaitanya Bhagavat, but it's really nectar. Really unbelievable nectar.
I think you should cry.
It does. I was just feeling that like, Yeah. So this is the first verse of the first chapter, first Leela of the Chaitanya Bhagavat. I offer my respectful obeisances unto Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Sri Nityananda Prabhu, whose arms extended down to their knees, who have complexions like molten gold, and who inaugurated the congregational chanting of the holy names of the Lord. Their eyes resemble the petals of a lotus flower. They are the maintainers of the living entities, the best of the Brahmanas, the protectors of the religious principles for this age, the benefactors of the universe, and the most merciful incarnations. You gotta turn a few pages because there's a lot of commentary. O my Lord, you are eternally existing in the past, present, and future, yet you are the son of Jagannath Misra. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, along with your associates, your devotees, your sons, or your disciples, your consorts, Vishnu Priya, Bhu Shakti, Lakshmi Priya, Sri Shakti, Navadvip Dham herself. Continues on. I worship the two brothers, Sri Krishna Chaitanya and Sri Nityananda, who have descended in this world as the supreme controllers. They have appeared in covered forms as the embodiments of mercy. All glories to Sri Gaurasundar, whose powerful activities are supremely pure, whose bodily complexion is like molten gold, whose eyes are like lotus petals, whose 6 beautiful arms extend to his knees, and whose heart is inundated by loving devotional sentiments as he enjoys dancing in various ways in the kirtan. All glories to Sri Krishna Chaitanya Chandra, who is fully independent, who is the fully independent Supreme Personality of Godhead and the abode of transcendental pastimes. All glories to his eternally pure activities. Sri Gaurasundar is the controller of all controllers, the Lord of the universe, and the embodiment of transcendental knowledge. All glories to his devotees. All glories to the dancing of his beloved associates. I'll be good. Just the sweet maybe. I then offer my obeisances to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, who incarnated in Navadvip and is known as Vishvambar. Die. So we can continue on. There's so much nectar in that, but we'll probably take some questions now. So thank you so much. All glories to Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Any questions? I think Matthew's been eager for a question for the whole.
You said there's souls in like a blade of grass.
Yeah.
Is there souls in the carpet?
No. There is, and there's entities and there's mites in the carpet. In that sense, there are. But Krishna says, Aparyami tvastvanyam prakritim vidime param jivabhuta mahabaho yeyadam daryate jagat. That there's 2 types of energy. There's the inferior energy or the external energy and the internal energy or the superior energy. So matter is moved by spirit. It's not conscious in the same way spirit is. And so things that are alive, they have spirit in them. Things that are matter, those are moved by spirit. So you don't incarnate as a rug.
Oh.
There's 8,400,000 species of life that the jiva soul enters into. Yeah. Although it is Krishna's energy in that sense, it's conscious because Krishna's inside it. And in the spiritual world, the rugs are conscious. Everything is conscious in the spiritual world. Everything. The whole world is conscious. But in the material world, this is matter. It's not conscious. But Krishna says, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. These compromise my separated material energies. Besides these 2, O Arjuna, O mighty armed one, there is another superior energy of mine, which comprises of the living entities which are trying to exploit the resources of this inferior material nature. So that's us. We're the living entities trying to exploit the resources of this inferior material nature. Yeah, nice question. Lavanga.
We were speaking about the afterlife, kind of like what happened with death in your class. What I found was so sweet about Krishna consciousness is that you don't have to wait till you die to experience everything that the Prabhupada's books tell you that you can experience. The consciousness. And other spiritual traditions, it's like you get something later after you die. But I mean, there's this person in Bobby comes, she becomes functional like Krishna. So, like, for one, who's properly hearing these messages of Krishna.
Did you get prasadam, Carlos?
Oh, like earlier.
Oh, thanks for coming.
Oh, back.
Oh, okay. Hare Krishna.
It cleanses from the heart the desire for material enjoyment. So just by hearing these like blissful pastimes, one is getting like, purification. And that's what's so sweet about this process. It's so easy. Yeah. And just by hearing, it's like reflecting this hearing process, you can actually experience Krishna.
Yeah. When I was in Mayapur, I remember thinking like, this is it. I was like, there's really like, I called my mom when I was in Mayapur. I was like, Mom, I made it. Like heaven, like whatever you were talking about, whatever we were talking about, hearing about in church, like I'm there. This is it. There's no difference between living and dying in Mayapur because it's a holy place. It's the most holy place of all. And if we're there, we're in the spiritual world. And yeah, that's Lord Chaitanya's birthplace, by the way, Mayapur. And you really are like, I'm in the spiritual world. And we can experience that being. That in Mayapur, it's very clear, like if I die, if I live, whatever, it doesn't make a difference because I'm an eternal being and this is my eternal occupation to be here and serve Krishna, serve Lord Chaitanya.
It's like you go to heaven before you
Die before dying. That's what Bhakti Swami says.
What's so important about knowing that your soul's eternal? What does that do for you?
What does that do for you?
Yeah.
You're no longer identified with the body. It's everything. I'm going to answer his question first. You're no longer identified with the body. Think about it. If you think you're this body, you have a lot of trouble, a lot of challenges in life. But if you realize I'm not this body, that changes everything. Because all your fears, all your goals, all your aspirations are different. It changes the whole thing. What is the goal of life is shifted. And when we think we're this body, then the body wants two things the most. It wants sex and it wants food. If you're a man, if you're a woman, it wants food and it wants sex. So yeah, that's like the body, that's the bodily concept of life. But if we can factually understand within our thick brain, I'm not this body, then all of a sudden, the choices I make are going to be drastically different. And then on a more subtle level, the subtle body wants fame, wants profit, wants adoration, it wants distinction. That's what the subtle body likes. But we're not that either. And so, people maybe have some sense control. They're not just like gross animals, but okay, they're acting for fame, they're acting for profit, they're acting for adoration and distinction. When you're not this body, when you understand not this body, all of a sudden, my goals, my direction in life, my choices, they're all different.
What makes that like we're not this body so confusing is like, what am I feeling when I'm feeling my hand?
Your consciousness is feeling your body. But if your consciousness is not in that body, you will no longer feel that body. Everything is just consciousness. You're just like plugged into this machine. It's actually like a virtual reality. It's a matrix. We're in this. The body is the hardware, but the consciousness is the software. So we can have different hardwares, but we're the software. So you're feeling the body. That's why we say we want to become ecstatic. We break down the word devotees. When we say we're ecstatic, we really mean that. We're not taking ecstasy. We actually are feeling ecstatic because static comes from the word stasis. Stasis comes from the word body, stata, Latin. Ecstatic means outside the body. So you're having an outside of the body experience. So when devotees are real, it's like, I feel ecstatic. That means like, really, I can't describe what I'm feeling. I'm so blissed out. I can't describe it. I'm ecstatic. because whatever it is, my body's incapable of feeling like this. My consciousness is ecstatic, and we can see it. It's not a made-up thing. I have seen it. It's common, devotees who are literally minutes from death are feeling the highest type of pleasure imaginable, even though they're full of cancer, full of terrible pain. It's very real. So, yeah. What do you want to say, Trudy?
Well, I just wanted to say, one time when I was at the temple in LA, I was really blessed out. My son used to tell me, one time he told me that he thought that this was just a phase I was going through. Just going to the temple once in a while and different things I was doing to become Krishna conscious. He thought it was just a phase. So when we're in the temple, it's like on a Saturday or something, and chanting. He's way across the temple. But he looked at me and I must have been in bliss, because I must have been 5 feet off the floor or something. But I went bliss out, and he looked at me and he gave me that look. And I think he knew at that moment that it ain't just a phase. I was in deep. Wow.
Not a phase, right? Because that's actually who we are.
That's deeply inspiring for him.
We're in a phase right now when we think I'm so and so, I'm this, I'm that. That's a phase, actually. Phase is gonna be over in 100 years max.
Yeah. So
But
the goal is to get back to Godhead.
yeah, well, the goal is to love Krishna. Whether we go back to Godhead or not, do we love Krishna? If we love Krishna, we're already back in Godhead. Whether we're there or our consciousness is there in that realm or there in this realm, we're already back in Godhead. So, any other questions? Comments? Realizations? We can keep going. We should keep going. This Krishna Kathas. What about you, Omar? You're hiding back there without a question or a. This is really showing the power of this process, that Omar's running out of questions. So that it's working.
Man, Omar used to take up all the question time.
I mean, one thing that I've still been thinking about is I still have trouble differentiating between material versus spiritual. And semantically, I can understand that spiritual is something that relates to God or spirituality. But experientially, it's hard. It seems like it's all one thing. If you're chanting or you're not chanting, you say that spiritual things are eternal. What does that mean? Is that activity always occurring, or it's always described as the effect is eternal, but then it's I don't know. It seems then everything's eternal. Isn't everything spiritual then?
No, because what is saying is that nasato vidyate bhavo nabhavo vidyate satah ubayarapi dristontas fanyos tatvadarshini. So the activities of the consciousness in eternality is that the eternal occupation of the soul is to serve Krishna's internal potency. I'll see. Let me see it. Let me see it, Bala. No.
Oh, now you want to
Oh, make an even offer. I'm not too attached. But I just felt bad because I didn't try. Shambhu cooked the whole thing. I didn't try his pasta. Usually they like when I try it, at least try it. Maybe I can just have a little bit and then we can share it or something. Because if I try it, then I can comment on it and they like it. No, but our eternal occupation is to serve God, not to serve, the external energy of God. Therefore, when we're absorbed in serving the external energy, it's just phases and phases and phases. But when we're serving Krishna, that activity situates us on the eternal platform. It situates us on the platform of eternality. And so when we actually engage in devotional service seriously, we exit that sense of temporality. We really situate ourselves and feel ourselves as eternal beings, performing our eternal occupation, living in our natural state. Because if we feel like I'm this body, then we have a big problem. Because that body's ultimately temporary. And so all the pleasures and things that we're experiencing in this body are ultimately temporary. But when the body is being utilized to serve Krishna, then we're experiencing that still through the facility of the body, but our consciousness is realizing or is aware that whether I'm in this body or in a different body, I'm actually feeling myself in my natural position. And therefore one feels full of knowledge, full of eternality, and full of bliss. And so one can understand that this activity is eternal, that I'll be chanting eternally, I'll be serving eternally, I'll be hearing eternally, I'll be rendering service to the lotus feet of the Lord eternally. So we may do that through this body or through a different body. We may, Lord Chaitanya says, I don't need any of these things. I just want devotional service birth after birth. So, yeah, the body's there. And those bodies, they're temporary, but the activities themselves are on the eternal platform. And therefore, the soul becomes aware. Because material activities, like if we're just out doing drugs, then the body's feeling so many different things. Right? The body's having these experiences. And they're temporary. And they're absorbing us in the bodily conception of life. That's material activities. But those activities that are Krishna conscious, the effect is that we begin to feel ourselves not this body. We begin to feel ourselves full of knowledge and bliss. We begin to have that experience of happiness, transcendental happiness. And therefore, as we continue on, whether we're in this body or the next body, our consciousness is yoked into that eternal place of being.
That makes sense. I guess like I'm more like the temporariness that exists on the spiritual platform. Because it's like if you're having an experience at one moment and like that experience changes, that means that like, if change exists, then like it's not eternal, like it's temporary. Like change implies temporariness, right? Like, if right now I'm experiencing happiness, or I'm like chanting, and then next I'm like, serving Krishna another way. There's like change that's occurring. So then like doesn't that imply there's like some like temporariness going on?
No, because these activities are absolute. So whether you're chanting or you're serving Krishna or taking prasadam, it's still the same devotional service. Krishna can eat with his eyes.
Hear with his nose.
He can hear with his nose. Yeah. So it's like Krishna's eating with his eyes, So it's like whether you're serving Krishna, as in chanting or serving Krishna in hearing, it's all Krishna. It's all absolute. And that's your eternal occupation to do that. So there's still, in one purport in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada says there's still, in a sense, time in the spiritual world as in events are happening in their own place. Maybe there's a rasa dance happening and then there's, Krishna stealing butter or whatever, but it's eternal in that it's not degrading. Like time breaks everything in this material world. This body gets old, everything dies, everything has a beginning, middle, and end. But in the spiritual world, that's not the case. Everything is new and fresh. Although there's still a sense of things happening in their own place. So the effect of time is not there. Yeah. All right. Any other questions, comments, criticisms?
Thank
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for being here. Very well. How was your time over there, Melissa?